All right. Hi, everybody. This is Heidi Klein, your Level Up Coach, and I am back here with you today in one of my conversations with a coach. And I would like to introduce you today to Dr. Melissa Oden, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself. You can tell we are both wearing red today because this happens to be the first Friday in February, and February is the American Heart Association's Wear Red for heart health and awareness around heart health for women. And I invited Melissa here today to tell us a little bit about what she knows about heart health and in particular about heart health and stress. And so I'm just going to turn it over to her and let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Heidi, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. This is really exciting. I love doing these interviews. So, my name is Dr. Melissa Oden. I am a licensed social worker in the state of Texas. I'm also a certified health education specialist. Currently, my work is I've got really two things that I'm doing, but my work is in public health, which, as you can imagine, is super busy right now. I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on that I'm project manager for. One of them is with active and healthy living, and the other one is in pandemic recovery. So you can just you can imagine how busy my world is right now just with those two things. But I also have an online classroom that I'm about to open up, and one of the classes that I'm piloting right now is called Women in Stress: Reclaiming Your Life, and it's based on my master's thesis when I was in the School of Public Health here in Fort Worth, Texas. And I wrote it about 10 years ago when I was finishing up that program. And I just never really let that topic go because, for most women, that's quite personal. And it was certainly personal for me, which is partially why I chose that topic. But I decided after COVID hit that we would revamp that and roll that out as my signature course. And so I am in the process of piloting that as we speak. We just finished week 4. And at some point, probably in quarter 2 of this year, that's going to go evergreen. And so more people will have an opportunity to take a look at that course. But anyway, so yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Well, I think when we talk about heart health for women, so much of it is just kind of healthy living, like you said, and I think that people understand the dietary changes that they need to make and understand that exercise is important. I think personally that the reality of stress and the way stress affects our body, especially our hearts, is actually one of the things that I don't know, that we're kind of in denial about. We like to act like we don't really need to deal with stress, and that it's I don't know, kind of boutiquey, right? Like, oh,
Yes.
self-care is fluffy
Yes.
as opposed to serious business.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm just curious what you would say to somebody who's making that argument. Well, I eat well and I'm exercising. Um, I don't need to think about stress in my life as a heart issue.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of your viewers know this, but heart disease is the number one killer of women. It is not anything else. Don't let the media tell you it's anything else. Statistically, we know that it's heart disease, and some of it is preventable. Most of it is preventable. There are some women out there who may be genetically disposed to heart disease because of the genetics in their family. But I always tell those women, genetics does not mean that you are destined for that end, right? That you can do certain things to take care of yourself. And yes, food is important. Sleep is critically important. But the other thing that's really important that I have learned in my research is that you have got to learn how to mitigate stress. Stress is probably the number one accelerator for all of the physical ailments that we have happening in our bodies. And so if you don't mitigate your stress, it's very, very difficult to be healthy and to have those good health outcomes. You can't eat right and exercise well and then not mitigate your stress and think that you're going to be okay, because at some point it will catch up to you. And the reason for that is because if you're familiar with anatomy and physiology, or A&P, there are two little nugget type things on the backs of your kidneys on each one called your adrenal glands. And when you're consistently stressed, those adrenal glands are pumping out cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone, and it's called fight or flight. If you remember from your A&P classes, it's called the fight or flight hormone. And the reason is because if you were being chased by a bear, you want that cortisol to kick in and you want to run away and get away from that bear. But the thing is that we live in urban America for the most part, and we are not being chased by bears anymore. And so the problem with that is that, when you're being chased by a bear and you stop being chased by a bear, the adrenals are supposed to calm down. Everything is supposed to return to balance and everything's okay. The problem with long-term stress is that those adrenals never have a chance to stop pumping out that cortisol. So you end up with adrenal burnout, which means that you can't respond to anything anymore. And then you've got all this cortisol that's pumping through your body and it's causing inflammation. And if you have read anything about anything lately, you know that inflammation is the number one cause of other diseases, not just heart disease. So you want that inflammation to be as low as possible in your body. And so that means that you've got to mitigate that stress so that cortisol is not consistently pumping through your body like that. So paying attention to your stress level is critically important for a good health outcome.
Okay. Well, and I know you have a whole program about this, but if you only had 5 minutes to talk to somebody about what they could do, what are a couple tips that you would list as a starting place, both for recognizing stress and maybe for mitigating it a little bit?
Yeah. So recognizing it probably is one of the harder things, because we get in patterns in our lives that are so ingrained in us that we feel like we have to do this and we have to do that and we can't say no. And so the first thing I would say is learn to say no. One of the women in my group right now, she said a couple of weeks ago, she said, my therapist told me that no is a complete sentence. And I
That's
said, thank you for sharing that, because that was honest truth. No is a complete sentence. And so, you know what, if you are a people pleaser like I am, you've got to learn how to say no. You've got to learn how to set some boundaries for yourself and learn how to say no. The other thing I would say is look at your schedule and make some hard choices about your schedule. What can come off your schedule? In fact, in week one, this group of women, I asked them to do their homework, and I told them, I said, figure out one thing you can take off your schedule. I'm not asking you to overhaul anything just yet. Just take off one thing. And do you know that there were probably 3 women who ended up adding 3 things and not taking them off? I'm not throwing them under the bus for that. What I'm telling you is it's very difficult to figure out what to say no to and how to look at your weekly schedule and figure out what you can take off. The other thing I would say is the harder part, and that is you got to tell the truth to yourself and about the things that are going on around you. I think that a lot of times we get into some very toxic situations that we feel like we can't get out of that are causing a lot of our stress. And I think when we stop and think about it, what are your governing values? What do you value the most in your life? If you are experiencing pain right now, and I don't just mean physical pain, I mean like mental and emotional and psychological pain, it probably means that you are not living what you say you believe. And you need to go back and look at those governing values. And this is the hard part. You've got to make some really hard choices. And it is hard for me to say that to women who aren't there yet and who are not ready to make those changes, but you have to hear it, because the only way you can truly mitigate stress for the long term is to live what you say you believe and take the time to figure out how to bring all of those things into alignment. Nobody wants to hear that because it's not a magic pill, not the silver bullet that they want, to just kind of snap your fingers and everything's going to be okay. But from what I've been able to discern and research over the last 10 years, that's really what it comes down to, is making some very hard choices about your life and telling yourself the truth about yourself and what you value.
That's actually, it's fascinating. One of the things that I frequently find that my clients say is that they want to live an authentic life, or they want to be authentically themselves in their lives, and aren't there. And honestly, I never really thought about that as being a factor in physical stress, that kind of doing the work and figuring out who you are who you want to be, who you want to present to the world, is actually a stress relieving process. Ultimately, I'm guessing there's probably some, for some people in particular, telling the truth is a stressful thing to start with, but ultimately living authentically is going to reduce stress in your life.
Yeah, the pain of telling yourself the truth is so much less than living in incongruency, right? Not living what you say you believe. That is a long-term pain that can only be taken away by telling yourself the truth about what's happening in your life. I've had many students come through my classroom who said that their parents wanted them to be doctors or lawyers, and they were in my Master of Public Health classroom, right? And so they had to deal with a lot of expectations from other people, but kudos to them for doing what their passion is, right? For learning what their passion is and pursuing that in the field of public health. And thank goodness, because as we can see around the world, our public health workforce has been critically important to us over the last year. It always is, just as a side note, but it's just, we work behind the scenes. Nobody sees us until a pandemic breaks out or the flu or whatever. So, so there are a lot of folks who get into their 40s and 50s and 60s and look back and go, wow, why did I not just fill in the blank? And so I really encourage women to not get to 40, 50, 60, 70 to look back and say, why didn't I just, have the courage to do it now? It is so much less painful to just walk through that now than it is to get 30 or 40 years down the road and just wish that you had done something different and are still living in pain. I have a great book that I will recommend to you, and it's not within grasp right now, but it's called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And in fact, I'm going to be teaching a series of classes on this here very shortly. But the idea behind this book is that our feelings that we don't deal with end up living up here and kind of embedding in our amygdala and other places in our brain. And they drive our physical health outcomes. So, for example, if you have high blood sugar, in Chinese medicine, high blood sugar means that you've lost the sweetness of life. And because you've lost the sweetness of life, your blood sugar elevates to compensate for that. I have been having trouble with my right knee. So I'm in PT right now for my right knee. And I pulled my book out. I was like, what is going on here? Well, it says something about not wanting to deal with authority and some other things. And I'm like, And so whenever something, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't want to work for anybody else. So maybe I do have an issue with authority. I don't know. But anytime I have something physical going on, I go to that book first and I'm like, okay, what is really going on here? And can I fix it up here? Now, as my best friend says, sometimes a cold is just a cold. Okay. I mean, sometimes a sinus infection is just a sinus infection. But it's interesting and fascinating to me how your brain can control your body and how just changing our thoughts can lower our stress and give us better physical health outcomes because we are dealing in reality and we have the coping mechanisms to be able to do that. So it's called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. I believe the author is Carol with a K Truman. And you can get it on Amazon for, I don't know, $5 or $6 now. It's really inexpensive, but I highly recommend that if people really want to pursue this line of thinking.
Right. Well, it sounds fascinating. And I just really appreciate the tying together of just sort of our mental and emotional health and our physical health, and this knowing that we need to have a healthy approach to life and to doing what we love in this world.
Right.
And I just want to say thank you for coming on. It was fun. Dr. Melissa and I showed up in a group this morning and in a red shirt. I knew immediately she was wearing it intentionally. And we were excited to share that we were focusing on heart health today. And it's just been fun to have her here for this conversation. So you can reach either of us online. There'll be links attached in the comments when I post this video for each of us. And we just are happy that we can share a little bit of an idea on how you might improve your own heart health and at the very least your own awareness about heart health this month.
Thank you so much for having me, Heidi. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're welcome.